Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. I follow a lot of very talented chart analysts, and not surprisingly as a result, we have a very broad range of where various XRP chart analysts believe XRP possibly could peak this market cycle. On the more conservative end, you have some analysts saying maybe it's going to be more like $8 to $10, maybe $11. And then on the higher end, out of the analysts that I follow, maybe a little over $30 or upper 30, something like that. And you do have some other analysts who will call for $100 XRP this market cycle, but I can't take that seriously. I'm happy to be wrong. You know, I could be wrong, and then we're sitting there at $100, fine. I think there's about no chance, and I've said why in tons of videos, so I won't be regurgitating that in this video. But there's a broad range, and I think I won't be surprised anyway. If, you know, you look at the broad range of price expectations from tons of reputable analysts, probably the lower end isn't quite right and the upper end isn't quite right. It's probably somewhere in between. That's what I usually find. So I don't know what that means. Maybe that only means XRP gets to 13, 14, 15 bucks. Maybe it does get to 20 bucks. Nowhere around there is crazy, by the way. And by the way, I don't even think $30 is crazy. I just don't think that's likely to occur. Look, happy to be wrong, and I could be. I'm just being honest. I'm very doubtful of that. But even someone that's more on the conservative end like me will be like, okay, if you have like a crazy amount of money flowing into crypto, a lot of it will cycle through into XRP. Okay, fine. Right. But I'm going to share with you perspective from one chart analyst in particular in this video, who he's basically just taking historic precedent. He's taking what happened last cycle and the cycle before that and saying, if that happens here, here's what the price of XRP would be. And interestingly, that would provide for a price range, which is very broad, admittedly, of $9.50 to $37.50. And look, you might, if you're an outsider new to crypto, you might be like, well, how the hell can we count on anything with a broad range like that? But the truth is, in crypto, like, it's normal, actually, whether you're talking about Bitcoin, ETH, XRP, to have a really broad range of expectations. So this actually isn't crazy. I mean, I wish that we could know with a higher level of certainty where this thing's going to land, but we just can't. But anywhere in that range is going to be life-changing for so many people listening. I'm confident of that. So we should talk a bit about that. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, here's an XRP USD chart, and this post is from chart analyst Egreg Crypto, who accurately called XRP breaking out last market cycle. And what he's doing here, just to be clear, he's not promising a specific price here, though he has made it publicly known. He thinks what's most probable is XRP is going to end into double-digit price action, that territory. Here specifically, he's not promising anything. He's just noting what happened in the past, and if we get something kind of like that, what that would look like now. And so he wrote the following. The rationale, he means rationale, there should be an E at the end of this. So anyway, the rationale behind $9.50 and $37.50 historically, XRP cycles show it rises above the EMA, exponential moving average, then retest it. And I will pause to note the EMA is this yellow line that you can see on the chart here, going back over a decade. Then he says, the final move from that retest point to the cycle's top creates the blow-off peak. And then he labeled cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3. Cycle 1 is the 2017 and 2018 bull run, where XRP peaked at $3.35 January 4th of 2018. Then you have cycle 2, which is when XRP was being attacked by the SEC, and XRP peaked at $2 because it was artificially suppressed. And then you have cycle 3, which is where we are right now. Right? So he says, in cycle 1, reached around 2,000%. So he's talking about 2,000% gains. In cycle 2, it did 455% from the retest point. So to be clear, he is when he's citing those percentages, he is not talking about the first pump. So you can see here in the first half of 2017, XRP actually pumped from about half a penny to somewhere in the neighborhood of 42 cents, and then it came back down, consolidated for half a year. He's not talking about that first leg up. Similarly, that first leg up in cycle 2, as he's labeled it, that would have occurred in November, and XRP went from, I can't recall, something like 20-something cents up to a little over 80 cents before coming back down. That was its first major, big, exciting pump because we hadn't seen 80 cents in like forever. That's what it felt like at the time anyway. And then he cites cycle 3 here, and we already had the first pump. That's why he's not talking about that. We already had the first pump. So in each of the last two cycles, there was a big pump, consolidation for about half a year, and then another major pump. So we're not talking about the first pump. It already happened, and we've been consolidating for close to half a year at this point. So those percentages, that 2,000%, that's for the second pump, which happened in roughly the middle of December in 2017, and then it peaked early January, and you got 2,000% gains from that price point. And then in April, I believe it was April anyway, of 2021, you had XRP's second pump, despite it being attacked by the government. And it went, I can't remember where it started. It went back. Well, okay, so XRP did crater back down to like 16 or 17 cents after the bad news about the SEC. And then it ran up to $2 for a cycle peak. And so he's just saying for that retest there, that's 455%. Okay, so then basically what he's doing is he's extrapolating and saying, okay, what if we get those percentage gains for this cycle? That's what he's getting at right here. So let me read more of what he had to say. Applying these percentages to the current cycle. After the initial surge and retest in April 2025, the EMA will likely rise with the price, setting the stage for the next big move. Based on historical blow-off phases, we could see 2,000% increase, which puts XRP towards $37.50. Or, he's got another bullet point here, he says, a more conservative 455% rise, which puts XRP about $9.50. He says, choose your targets wisely, set your exit plans, and avoid getting caught up in hype. Stick to your strategy and stay prepared. Okay, so just because a particular percentage happened in the past, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to follow along. But I wanted to share with you some additional thoughts on this. So look, just as a concept, understand this. In general, percentage gains from one cycle to the next market cycle are likely, and should be, typically anyway, less as more money enters the space. So yes, you'll have a larger market cap, more dollars flowing in, certainly, but in terms of percentage gains, lower. And that shouldn't be hard to understand why. Imagine that there was something tiny, just hypothetically, is like a $20 market cap. Well, any Joe Schmo could take a $20 bill out of their wallet and you just doubled it. Okay, but what happens when you have like a multi-trillion-dollar market cap for something? Well, it takes way more money flowing in, right? So the percentage gains will be lower, even though you can have way more money flowing in, right? So that's why from one cycle to the next, and this has certainly been true of Bitcoin, you've seen way higher dollars, so just dramatic increases. But the percentage gains, actually not so much. And so again, in general, yeah, gains from one cycle to the next should be less as more money enters the space, even though you get way higher dollars and you can still get crazy life-changing wealth. But there are two caveats here. And one of them I kind of cited a second ago, but let's be clear on this. XRP has been artificially suppressed for years due to the SEC lawsuit. So it has lots of ground to catch up. Look, if XRP had not been attacked in the way that it was, the price of XRP today, I firmly believe, would be way higher than it is. It's impossible to know exactly what that would be, but XRP is one of the most fundamentally strong, fundamentally useful coins. It's strong utility, strong utility, very obviously, and it just works. It's great for payments, broadly speaking. It just is, and it turns out the world values that. And so, if not for the SEC on a global scale, crazy amounts of money would have flown in. So it's not surprising to think that XRP, since the world always valued it, we just wanted the green light from the powers that be. Well, once that happened, look what occurred. Once Trump won the election, XRP was the #1 performing coin in crypto in the entire asset class out of the top 100 coins. #1. That's not a fluke. It always deserved to be treated in that way. It's just that with the government being how the government was under the previous administration, it just wasn't going to happen. So that's one reason that it makes sense to believe that you could have big gains. And by the way, and I will say this, if your last cycle, if you're talking about from the bottom to the top, XRP bottomed at 10 cents and still hit $2, that's a 20-fold increase. Freaking 20-fold while it was being attacked from the government. This thing, XRP is a maniac, okay? When this thing goes, it just goes. So that's one reason. It's been artificially suppressed and the market's catching up. So you could have a way bigger percentage than 455% this cycle for the second pump. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't make price predictions. But if that happens, I'll not be surprised. That's what I'm saying right here. There's another reason, though. I mean, for that reason alone, though, like it wouldn't be crazy to see way larger percentage gains. But also, if you take a look at a technology bell curve, you'll see that for technologies that end up being adopted, they reach a point where adoption increases, but it doesn't just increase. And here, let me pull this up. Look on the right here. I just did a quick Google search for technology bell curve. This is one example of many. So you reach a point where not only does adoption increase for a technology, but it increases exponentially. It increases at a faster and faster pace. And that's another reason that it is possible that percentage gains could be great this cycle compared to last. It's, nothing's guaranteed. I just won't be surprised. So look at the technology bell curve. You can see what happens. There's the innovators, they adopt, and it's at a fairly slow clip in terms of adoption. And then there's the early adopters, which I think most would argue we're probably like in the beginning phase of early adopters in 2025, probably. But see, that would be the point where this picks up at a fascinating clip. And then you reach the point where the early majority has adopted, and then there are fewer humans to adopt. And so, although you have more humans adopting the technology, it slows down. So you have the late majority and then the laggards who are not innovators in the least. They're the opposite of innovators. And then you get to the end where almost everything is, almost everyone rather, has adopted the technology. And so in the case of XRP, given that it's functionally useful, and I don't need to get into, for the purpose of this video, I don't need to get into the reasons why, but it's very obvious if you've been paying attention, it just makes sense that this would continue to unfold. So if you're talking about that, this is why I'm saying, like, you could have, especially compared to last cycle, you could have a way higher percentage just for that second pump, just for the second pump. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but if you want to talk about the types of things that are possible, like, none of this is crazy. I'm, just my humble opinion, we're all entitled to our opinions. I'm not confident we're going to be into the 30s, $30+ for XRP, but again, I'll say it again, even I acknowledge that you have crazy money flown in, might happen. I think $100 is in Looney Tunes land for this cycle. Although even then, if you're talking without a time limit, will XRP ever hit at least $100? That's possible. It actually could. I mean, I've been saying forever, like, it's not crazy to think that XRP would have a multi-trillion-dollar market cap. And so if XRP continues to be useful, well, yeah, it's not crazy to think it could, at some point, if adoption like this continues, break $100. I just don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Some people think it's going to happen next cycle or the cycle after that. And that's a fun discussion. I don't pretend to know. I just don't believe for a second it's coming this cycle. That's just insane. The amount of money that would have to flow in. I mean, what's Bitcoin going to then? Like $1 million this cycle? Like, come on. It's not happening. I really don't believe. I mean, I'll be happy to be wrong, but I do not believe for a moment that's happening. But if you're talking about 10, 15, 20, maybe $25, like, even that, and this is why I was saying at the outset of the video, you have this broad range of expectations from reputable chart analysts in terms of where they think it's going to be. Some are more conservative by nature, some are less conservative by nature. Probably the truth is somewhere in the middle, whatever that means. So that's why I say, like, if it's 15 or 20 bucks, something like that, I mean, wouldn't surprise me anyway. Well, we'll see here. But it's exciting. So anyway, these are the types of things that very well could be ahead of us. I just don't understand how there's any XRP holder out there who could not be ridiculously bullish and excited right now. Because this is what's at hand, folks. XRP is no longer being artificially suppressed. People have figured it out. XRP just is a winner. And so when more and more money flows into the crypto space, yeah, you better believe it's going to blow up. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say, all right? That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.